Good afternoon again, everybody, and thank you for tuning into my channel. Once again, Just Business. Today's lesson, we're going to begin to dive into just a study of economics as a whole. And in the last couple of videos, we kind of touched on brief little topics, including minimum wage, a little bit of fiscal policy, and then the difference between macro and microeconomics. In today's video, I want to just kind of be a little more focused on economics as a whole. So this video is just going to kind of be an intro. There's going to be a lot of terms and definitions thrown at you. You don't need to necessarily memorize them all. It's just they're just important ideas to consider when studying economics. Before we get started, if you could subscribe to Just Business, my channel, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you could give this video a thumbs up, we could keep on pushing these out and giving you more knowledge on how the economy works, and of course future videos pertaining to business in general. So let's get started. So economics. What exactly is economics? Well, quite simply, economics is considering how we allocate very scarce resources in our economy to fulfill the unlimited wants and needs of all the individuals. It's essentially studying how decisions are made. So of course this is broken down into micro and macro. Again, we touched on that in the previous video. If you want to get an idea of the difference between the two, feel free to watch my last video and I explain all that. So something that's very important to consider when beginning to dive in to the study of economics is figuring out exactly how an economist thinks. It's important. There's four main ideas I want you to consider here, four main topics, if you will, which economists focus on heavily. All right, so that's going to be opportunity cost, thinking at the margin, incentives, and understanding that trade creates value. Those are the most important aspects of economics. Now, each one of these topics can be delved into much deeper. Some are a little more confusing or challenging to understand than others. We'll definitely go ahead and make more economic lesson videos in the future, which sort of focus on each one of these aspects individually and how they play a role in the study of economics. But just to give you a quick brief overview of each of them, just for your own knowledge, so you can get a sort of a foundation for the intro to economics and sort of just a general understanding of these terms. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you a brief overview of each of these. So opportunity cost. What is opportunity cost? Well, it's not what you might think it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual price of something. Like say you go to the store and you buy a more expensive bread. Well, that's not necessarily dealing with opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is simply the next best option that you give up to take another option. So for example, to make it very simple, let's say your mother is going to make your favorite chicken dinner, but your friend asks you to go out to a movie tonight, and you decide to go to the movie. Well, what's your opportunity cost? Your opportunity cost for that decision is the chicken dinner that your mother was going to make for you. One thing that's important to understand is opportunity cost is not everything you give up. It's just the next best alternative to the option that you decide to go with. So, let's say instead of going to the movies, you could, maybe watch TV or go to bed early or not eat dinner, period. But your next best alternative to your mother's chicken dinner is going to the movies. So if you decide to eat your mother's dinner and you forego the movie, well then going to the movie with your friends, that's your opportunity cost for eating that dinner. And it's important to understand that everything has an opportunity cost, especially when dealing with economics. It's very important to understand this. It can be a little bit confusing, especially when we start getting into the graphs and the charts and exactly how this impacts businesses and the economy as a whole. But it's definitely something that is learnable, and it's definitely something we can dig into a little bit deeper in future videos. So stay tuned for that. The next thing we're going to speak about when thinking like an economist is thinking at the margin. This is also very important and can also be something that's a little bit confusing to understand. So definitely feel free to ask questions, and also there'll be another video made dealing with just marginal thinking. But essentially thinking at the margin is deciding if the benefit of one additional unit of something is greater than or equal to the cost of something. Now I know this may sound confusing, but in general sort of terms, it's marginal revenue should equal their marginal costs, right? Revenue should not be lower than cost. So where marginal thinking comes into play here is if a business decides to produce one more unit of something, let's say one more unit of whatever it is they sell, if that is greater than or equal to their marginal cost, then they should produce that additional unit. However, if their revenue is not equal to their cost, then they should not create that additional unit, right? So essentially, if marginal revenue is lower or less than marginal cost, they should reduce their output to reduce their costs and get to that equilibrium point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So that's essentially what thinking at the margin is. It's just whether or not the benefits of that additional unit is going to be greater than or equal to the cost. Another aspect of thinking like an economist is understanding incentives. Incentives are very important. Now these can be direct incentives or indirect incentives, and they don't necessarily have to be good incentives, if that makes any sense. So now, of course, this may be a little bit confusing as well. I know I've said that a couple times now, but once we dive into it a little deeper, it'll make more sense, and you'll definitely get a better understanding of how both of these direct and indirect incentives work when considering economics. And lastly, understanding that trade creates value. Trade is very important in economics. This is probably by far the most confusing for people who don't have a good understanding of economics. There's a lot that goes into it, sort of calculations, understanding how trade actually does create value. But once we kind of get in there and I give you some background on how it works, some graphs, some calculations, do a little practice, you'll see it's not really that difficult to kind of grasp the concept. So essentially those are the four most important topics to consider when dealing with economics and understanding how economists actually think. So again, in summation, the four most important topics in economics that economists focus on is opportunity cost, thinking at the margin, incentives, and understanding that trade creates value. All right, so I hope you learned something today. Again, this was just an intro into the very vast world of economics. We definitely will go ahead and delve into these topics in much greater detail in the future and in coming videos that I have planned. So be on the lookout for that. I hope that you got a little bit of a foundation in which to move forward with for your future in studying economics. So that's going to be it for today. Hope you guys have a great holiday and a great new year. Again, thank you for tuning in to Just Business. If you could like and subscribe, it'd be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you next time.